Hey there, Purple Principle listeners. Robert Pease here with a quick note about our newsletter, The Purple Principle Report. That's our curated roundup of news and articles on the perils of polarization, where we also spotlight people working to bridge the red and blue divide. Gerrymandering, filibusters, these topics can be tricky to navigate and to spell, but we've got your back. Click the link in our show notes or go to purpleprinciple.com to subscribe.
They were really kind of at each other's throats heading into the special election. And, I kind of expected them to maybe try to, rework their messaging, try to be more cohesive. And it really hasn't gone that way at all.
Matt Buxton is the editor of the Alaskan political blog, The Midnight Sun, and co-host of the Hello Alaska podcast. He's describing the campaign vibe in Alaska as the Trump-endorsed Sarah Palin and the Trump-targeted Lisa Murkowski and other candidates grapple with the new ranked choice voting system. Can ranked choice voting moderate our severely polarized politics? A lot of eyes on Alaska this election, and no state watching more closely than Nevada, where open primaries plus ranked choice is in fact a 2022 ballot measure.
A lot of times you'll have a campaign that then picks up a grassroots following, and this has been reversed. We've had a grassroots effort going on that got picked up as a major campaign.
Doug Goodman there is the founder of Nevadans for Election Reform, the group that originated this effort. I'm Robert Pease, and on this Purple Principle, we're looking at major efforts to depolarize politics with Matt Buxton on the 2022 Alaska election and Doug Goodman on the 2022 Nevada ballot measure. Our guide on these state visits is our own Purple Principle reporter, associate producer Dylan Nicholls, with a quick explanation of ranked choice voting.
Yeah, Rob, RCV, as it's often called, has been used in dozens of mayoral elections nationwide and at the Academy Awards. But Maine was the first state to implement ranked choice voting for a federal congressional election back in 2018. Now, in this Alaska election, there will be a congressional, senatorial, and a governor's race all determined by ranked choice voting. And that's where voters have a chance to indicate not just their first choice candidate, but their second, third, and fourth choices as well.
So, Dylan, remind us, what is the main advantage of being able to rank those candidates in that way over the way elections have been held in the U.S.?
Yeah, well, we have a great cartoon on ranked choice voting on our website. Highly suggest our listeners check that out. It provides a full explanation, but basically it does away with plurality voting, where one candidate can win with just a small percentage of votes if the race is crowded enough. So with RCV, instead, low-ranking candidates are eliminated until one candidate finally receives a 50% threshold to win the election. So they have a mandate.
And could that civilize campaign rhetoric in any way?
In theory, yes, but in practice, maybe not so much, at least not so far in Alaska's congressional race, which had a special election in August and is back in campaign mode for a full-term election in November with the same three major candidates.
And remind us who those candidates are.
You are in the arena, and are you ready to take our country back?
Well, a certain former governor named Sarah Palin, another GOP candidate, Nick Begich, who's not a big Palin fan.
I believe that the state of Alaska has tremendous potential, and with the proper representation, we can make an effective business case for the state down in Washington, D.C.
And the centrist Democrat Mary Peltola, an Alaskan Native.
I've run a campaign letting people know I'm pro-jobs, pro-family, pro-fish, and pro-choice.
Now, with just a bit of cooperation, one of those two Republicans might have won that special election back in August. In other words, if they had earned more of the second choice votes of the other's supporters. But as Matt told me back then, that's not how it played out during the campaign or the voting.
What's really going to be interesting moving forward is when the tabulation happens in this race, we'll see, whether or not Begich voters ranked Palin, whether they ranked Peltola, whether they wrote somebody else in, or whether they just left it blank. And from kind of my perspective, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people left it blank because it's been so nasty. I think that they've really been messaging like, don't rank any Democrats, but they kind of haven't been as sort of forceful with the, hey, Republicans need to stick together.
And another complicating factor was Trump's visit to Anchorage and his effort there to cast doubt on the integrity of ranked choice voting.
You have that ranked choice crap voting. If you're in 5th place, you get points. If you're in 3rd place, you get points. How many people? All right, Sarah Palin won, but we had a couple of people in 2nd place. We're going to give them the victory, right? You know? You got to watch that. This is really horrible what's going on with our elections.
So back in August, I asked Matt whether Trump mocking RCV may have backfired on Trump's candidate in the race, Sarah Palin.
And I think, again, this is so unique because, I think if it was a generic Republican, it would be easier for a Begich voter to rank a generic Republican rather than a Sarah Palin Republican. So I think that's a huge element of it. And that's sort of the interesting thing, too, is that for all the decrying of the system, it's Palin that kind of stands to actually benefit from the ranked choice system. So, her success is entirely based on whether or not the system works kind of as intended.
And Dylan, what was the result of that special election in August?
It's looking like Buxton was pretty much right. Some cooperation would have been really helpful for the GOP. The Republican Nick Begich, he came in a close 3rd, and so we knew when we were talking that he'd be eliminated and his votes would be redistributed between the other 2 candidates. Sarah Palin needed about 2/3 of those second-choice votes from Begich voters, but she only ended up getting about half. Almost 1/3 actually preferred Democrat Mary Peltola to Palin.
We've got some projected results in a special election for a U.S. House seat. The state's former governor, Sarah Palin, was in the runoff, but NBC News can project that Democrat Mary Peltola will win the seat.
Very good news. I'm very happy. And I'm just extremely grateful to the Alaskan voters who put their faith in me. And just need to take a breath, I think.
So big crossing of party lines there. And another not so surprising statistic, almost 1/5 of Begich voters chose not to rank anybody at all.
Which kind of defeats the purpose of ranked choice voting. But now it's Groundhog Day, even though we're talking about Election Day. All 3 of these congressional candidates are competing again for the same seat in November, just 3 months later. Has this changed anything about how they're running their campaigns?
Not really. I sat down again with Matt Buxton more recently to discuss just that. And pretty incredibly, from his reporting, it does kind of seem like more of the same.
We talked about the sort of the strategy that they took, which was to be really, they were really kind of at each other's throats heading into the special election. And, I kind of expected them to maybe try to, rework their messaging, try to be more cohesive. There's a refusal to learn. But it's been interesting, too. And what's interesting, actually, is, we're not really seeing a whole lot of changing strategy on the national level or really even the statewide level in those races. But we have seen a little bit of shifting tones on the local election level where conservative candidates are really opting not to run these kind of like bombastic, conspiracy theory loving candidates in the way that they used to be. I think a lot of these local elections in recent years have been kind of putting forward some of the most kind of scary people. And I think a lot of moderates looked at that, said, no, thanks. We have to understand, a lot of these elections are decided by probably 5 to 10% of people, that centrist sort of people in the middle, kind of where they go sort of helps decide these close races. And I think at least appearing to be not actively trying to burn the house down, I think it is an effective sort of change in strategy. And so, we're seeing some sort of changes here and there.
In Mary Peltola, did the most moderate candidate win? And beyond that, is that a direct result of ranked choice voting? Is it a direct result of this being a very unique vote split because of Sarah Palin's likability issues with Alaskans? Or is it a little bit of both?
I think it's a little bit of all the above. I would say that Mary Peltola is certainly the most moderate candidate in the race. She is progressive on a lot of the issues that matter to progressives kind of broadly. But, she's supportive of resource development, is kind of understanding that drilling and mining pay the bills in Alaska. And I think that is a really good kind of understanding of sort of the complexity of Alaska, right? That we are a state that relies heavily on the environment, is feeling, the brunt of global climate change. There's coastal erosion, bigger storms, all this sort of stuff. But at the same time, I think she understands, that can't turn off the oil production, at least quite yet.
Yeah, well, we also spoke in August about how there was a real opportunity for competitive cooperation in the governor's race between Democrat Les Guerra's campaign and independent Bill Walker's. Neither of them nor their voters want to see Republican Mike Dunleavy stay in office. Has there been any strategic cooperation between those two campaigns? A difference between how they're running these last few months since the special election from the congressional campaigns?
I mean, to an extent, though, but, I look at it and I'm not seeing enough to where it might matter, right? I think what we're seeing in a lot of areas, though, is kind of a falling back to some of the fighting about who gets into that second place spot, right? It's a race to finish in second, and with the hope that the votes will consolidate around you. And I think that they're still kind of running for second place. They're running to beat the other one still. There was earlier in the campaign cycle, there was some more kind of direct pot shots at each other. Unless it really changes in the next 3 weeks, it's going to be pretty tough for them to get together. And I think, too, the thing to keep in mind is that upset victories in ranked choice voting is extremely rare. It takes a lot of work to pull it off. And the closer Dunleavy is to 50% in the first round, the harder and harder it gets to try to unseat him.
Since we last spoke, Alaskans have officially seen all of the ranked choice process in an Alaskan election now, including the tabulation portion, which occurred after 2 weeks of mail-in ballots coming in and then instant tabulation. Was there confusion when the results came out amongst Alaskans? Was there some doubt, lack of faith in the election as a result? I know that there are characters like Donald Trump, who has traveled to Anchorage, Sarah Palin, who has his endorsement, who are trying to cast doubt on the process. But how did Alaskans feel overall, having gone through their first ranked choice election?
For all the talk about how the system was confusing or hard to understand or decode, the polling and just the election itself, I think, shows that a lot of people really, truly did understand the system. It wasn't that, complicated, really. And so I think there's pretty broad buy-in with it so far, and it's going to be, so I think I talked to some people who are involved in advocating for the system recently. I think they're very aware that there's going to be efforts to repeal it on the legislative level. But I think that there's a belief that being able to hold up polling that says 80 to 90% thought it was easy is going to make a big difference, when legislators are looking at it, especially because, a lot of these legislators that will be in office will be there because of ranked choice voting in the open primaries, right? I think there's several races, too, where we've seen kind of more moderate Republicans run and get past the primary system and head on to the general election with really good chances, where they wouldn't have been able to do it in the past if the Republican primary voters were playing that kind of traditional gatekeeping role. And I think when we talk about the system moving forward, I think really what's going to make it endure and last a long time is that the outcome of it, right? Like, if it works and if it gets, maybe more representation, I think that is a good pathway for it to last and survive whatever attacks that are going to be coming towards it.
Hey folks, Rob Pease here to announce Fluent Knowledge has a new wellness podcast, My Body Odyssey, on the challenges of living a more active lifestyle.
And then just in the past few years, I broke my wrist. I have multiple sprains in my ankles I'm playing on right now, broken a few fingers, multiple concussions.
Mom guilt is hard. Like, that impacts your training sometimes too.
But the rewards of being more active are just plain enormous.
If I didn't have competition, I don't know if my mental health would be as strong as it is.
It has helped me overall avoid side effects from diabetes.
We follow protagonists on their odysseys, getting expert insights along the way, like Dr. Mohammed Biden, a neurosurgeon at the Mayo Clinic.
It's important to try to avoid playing injured because small injuries can beget bigger injuries, and they can really get out of hand very quickly.
Full episodes on all major apps and at mybodyodyssey.com. My Body Odyssey is a Fluent Knowledge production. We've been speaking with Midnight Sun editor Matt Buxton. He's reporting that ranked choice voting may not have moderated campaign behavior all that much in the Alaska congressional or governor's races, but it may have helped moderate candidates at the local level stay in the running this November.
And RCV could moderate the Alaska Senate race, where the centrist Republican Lisa Murkowski faces the Trump-endorsed challenger Kelly Tshibaka. Again, Murkowski, the only sitting senator running for re-election this year, who voted to convict and remove President Trump from office post-January 6th.
But Senator Murkowski has publicly stated she will rank Democrat Mary Peltola first on her ballot in the upcoming Alaska congressional election. That should win her some independent and crossover votes. And the centrist Democrat Peltola said she'll do the same for Murkowski in the Senate race. So Alaska is different, less partisan, more indie-minded, and now Alaska votes differently too.
And there will be a lot of interest in how this all plays out in November, including from the state of Nevada, because Nevadans will vote on whether they want to adopt ranked choice voting similar to Alaska's. And that's in no small part due to the efforts of Doug Goodman, founder of Nevadans for Election Reform. He's been trying to get this issue on the ballot for almost a decade, and his grassroots campaign gained steam this year with outside funding. We talked about what lessons he's taking from Alaska, the bipartisan opposition to this Nevada effort, and ranked choice's chances of passing in the Silver State.
I'm not a political organizer by any stretch of the imagination. In 2018, I actually filed an initiative which would have eliminated taxpayer-funded primaries and just gone to a general election using ranked choice, but I couldn't raise the money for that. Just over the years, the interest in making elections fairer, of giving Nevadans, choice, of making races competitive, has just gained traction on both sides, on all sides. And to be honest, I really don't know what happened with Alaska, and Catherine Gale. Catherine Gale, the woman, of course, behind that got Alaska going. She, of course, got very involved with the Nevada effort.
Final Five voting would help deliver a free market politics, which, delivers innovation, results, and accountability the way free markets do in well-functioning private industry. So we have something that's fundamentally very in tune with conservatives and also fundamentally very in tune with values that progressives and Democrats espouse.
How or what prompted her to identify Nevada as the next likely place to be able to implement Final Five voting? I have to think that everything we've been doing and all the people we've been engaging over the last 9 years resonated, that, the voter registration trends that we've been highlighting. And I know she was aware of those. I know she's very aware of the trends happening in the state over several years. And for whatever reason, said, yep, Nevada's going to be it. And then the coalition just started the formal team for what was Nevada Voters First, now is a Yes on 3 campaign, came together last fall, early spring, and it became a very professional, full-fledged campaign. All the people that we've been working with on the ground over the years were brought in.
I do want to turn back to Alaska because you mentioned that. Fascinating election. What did the process there and the results indicate to you about how ranked choice voting might fare in Nevada, just in implementation?
Well, of course, we've been watching Alaska very closely just because of that. That if it worked in Alaska, of course, it would be a positive for us. If it fell flat on its face in Alaska, it would hurt us. But no, the process worked just the way it was supposed to. What you saw with, Sarah Palin, she told her voters, don't rank anybody second. Peltola actually had a large enough lead in first choice that the second choice votes she got were enough to give her a majority. So that's the way the process is supposed to work. And so We're looking forward to, the general election here to see what the results are. And again, however it breaks out, if Begich actually ends up, with, enough first choice votes to where he's carried over with Palin's second choice votes and different results, it'll still be the reflection of the will of the voters, who a majority of the voters want to represent them. Polls that I have seen show potential for Mary Peltola to actually win in the first round, which, again, if she did, it would just validate the whole process that she was the voters' choice.
Turning back to Nevada quickly and the ballot question there and its chances, we talked a bit about this grassroots campaign that has now become this well-funded campaign for ranked choice voting in Nevada, but still a climb, still difficult to get that passed, even with the resources. Alaska was able to pass ranked choice voting in 2020, but it had 58% unaffiliated voters, so much larger independent population. Does Nevada have a large enough nonpartisan population to carry this over the goal line, do you think?
When you look at the percentages, the voter share, and the trends in voter share, and you look at how Nevadans vote, and when you look at the support that ranked choice voting and open primaries have, there's definitely enough support to carry this over the threshold. When you make the point of, voters having more choice, not having to settle for the lesser two evils, this resonates. But the actual numbers, over 50% of 18 to 34-year-olds, that's the largest demographic group there is. Really, there are more millennials than there are baby boomers. When you throw in Gen Z, large section, and over 50% of them are not registered to a party. But even when you get into our most conservative areas, which are the rural counties, Nevada has 15 rural counties, the average of voter share of the combined non-DRR is over 30%. But definitely, the numbers definitely show that the support is there, and those numbers keep growing. When I first started tracking the figures, a monthly change of 0.1% would be phenomenal, would be wow. We're seeing monthly changes, of 0.25%, 0.5% routinely. So, yeah, the mood is there.
How does it feel to you on the ground working on this? How do you think Nevadans feel about this? Is there a lot more negative rhetoric about ranked choice voting as we approach the election that you're having to combat?
Yeah, you hear it's too confusing, why change, the standard arguments like that. Yeah, I don't think we ever went into this thinking this was going to be a slam dunk. But the interesting thing is that this last week, our TV ads started running, our mailers started going out, and we're actually getting a few more requests to explain what's going on. Every presentation that we do, there are questions about the process, about some of the negative stuff people are hearing. And when we explain it, when we present the facts to people, oh, okay, yeah, now I get it.
Yeah, we spoke to Shay Siegert back in 2020 when he was running the campaign for Alaskans for Better Elections for ranked choice voting in Alaska. He spoke to us a little bit about the opposition that effort faced.
The biggest obstacle, and I think our biggest opposition, is the kind of radicals on either side and the special interests on either side who really are trying to hold on to their power over elections and candidates. What we're seeing is politicians from either side jumping in to bipartisanly oppose this.
Well, I think I have to agree with Shay. And Shay actually was involved in the initial efforts in the campaign here after Alaska. And, but no, the opposition, the public opposition, is loss of power. That the power will return to the voters instead of the party, insiders. So that is, you listen to their arguments and it's like, it's just all, it's too confusing. So you're telling people they're too stupid to make choices. And it's a power. It is a power grab that what some of these elected officials are going to do when they're sitting in their living room, filling out their ballot, we don't know. It'll be interesting. Just some of the talk we've heard that, because right now we've been told by electeds, I really like this, but I can't say anything publicly about it because I'll get primaried, or I won't get any bills heard in the legislature if I publicly support this. And that's because of the structure that we're trying to change. And, well, you know what? That's what the voters want that to happen. They want the power to come back to them.
That was Doug Goodman, founder of Nevadans for Election Reform, describing the stiff opposition to ranked choice voting from both major parties, but some strong enthusiasm from indie-minded voters.
Yeah, that's an initiative we'll have to watch closely. Polls in the summer of 2022 have shown that opposition to ranked choice is growing as we near the election. So the 20% of voters who remain undecided will be a crucial factor.
Many thanks to Doug Goodman and to Midnight Sun editor and Hello Alaska co-host Matt Buxton. You can find links to their work in the show notes to stay informed on the latest in ranked choice voting spread across the nation. Thanks to Dylan for great reporting here on a voting system which could have a huge effect on our polarized national politics if efforts like that in Alaska and Nevada are replicated in even just a handful of states. We'll be following all of that closely. But coming up next on The Purple Principle, we wrap up our extended series on these not-so-united states by reflecting on lessons learned in episode visits to Texas and California and their red-blue rivalry, to once purple Massachusetts and still very purple Georgia and Alaska. We hope you'll join us for that episode, and do want to thank all our listeners from all of us on the Purple Principle team. Purple Principle is a Fluent Knowledge production. Original music by Ryan Adair Rooney.